This is the year, stepping into something new. So I just want to say hello to you really quick. Back there in the back, Amy, would you stand and just wave at everybody? This is my wife, Amy, and she's absolutely amazing. Together, we lead a congregation in Pasadena, Texas. There's two Pasadenas, one in California. This is the one everybody always thinks of when you say Pasadena. They're like, California? No, Texas. Where's that? Southeast Houston's where it is. But we lead a congregation there, and Amy, honestly, probably does most of the leading and ministering and pastoring people, and she's just absolutely incredible. And so they just let me talk a few times here and there, and that's what I get to do. So we have 4 children together, 25, 24, 21, and 20. That means we had 4 children, ages 5 years old and under. So we're tired. We're tired. So we had to go on drugs to be able to live to 70, 80 years old to be able to recuperate from that. So we are just absolutely having a blast what we're doing, leading a congregation. But I'll tell you this, as God is pouring this revelation of what the kingdom mandate is on the church, here's some things that I feel like he has given me as an assignment. He's specifically spoken some things to me. It's what Pop was talking about last night. Make sure that what you're doing is what God has said. And here's my issue personally, that I believe that God has said something to me, but I'm afraid of what it's going to cost me to obey. Because here's what I'm afraid of. I'm just going to be vulnerable. I'm afraid that if I'm successful at the mandate that he's given me, I may actually empty my church, and I may lose my job. So I'm going to talk about that just a little bit. November of 2018, we reconnected with Dr. Cottle, and we went to a conference in Dallas, Texas, International Coalition of Apostolic Leaders. And I heard a message there that resonated in my soul that I'd never heard before. It's called The Divided Gospel, and the difference between the gospel of salvation and the gospel of the kingdom. I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. But my father-in-law, who is my spiritual father, had spent 2 years talking about the church, the Ekklesia, in 1995. And so 2018, we hear this message. And it's like the seed was in my soul. And when I heard it, I knew that was what God was talking to us about for this season. And I began to lean in. And so they were talking about all kinds of concepts. And I went up with Dr. Cottle and had questions on a paper. And I'm like, explain this to me, because I don't understand what we're talking about right here. And he said it was like this, and I started arguing with him. You know, I didn't win, but I did try. And he goes, no. And so he really walked me through some stuff. A lady from Aruba stood on the stage and began to talk about what they were doing to transform a nation. Lizette Malmberg from Aruba began to talk about how they had deployed a school, and they were raising up kingdom life leaders and sending them into the 7 mountains of culture. And when she was talking, I don't know if you've ever heard somebody preach or speak, and it's like they're speaking your native language. And there was something that was in me that it felt like her words were grabbing in the depth of my soul and pulling out of me. And I was literally in agony as she was talking, just weeping. Couldn't write any notes. And my wife and I said, we have to go talk to this lady and find out what in the world they're doing. And so we partnered with her. We partnered with Embassy College. Began to bring some courses to our church to train life leaders. September 2019, we launched a school at our church to begin to train kingdom leaders. And by February of 2020, everybody knows the 2020 year. By February of 2020, we had seen some things and realized we needed to adjust the model of our church. And I was lamenting to our executive pastor at the time, he's now our community pastor, Nick, that was part of our staff, and we were sitting talking, and I said, if we change our model and do what we are supposed to do, the problem is everyone will just go down the street to a church that will do the consumer thing for them. And there's a lot of churches in Houston, and some of them honestly do it way better than we do at our small church. And I said, if we change this model, people were just, it's not going to matter. They'll just go find another place that does what they want them to do. How can we implement this thing? How can we change this model? And we were struggling about how how to do what God was calling us to do. March of 2020, everybody closed their doors. And all of a sudden, it's like the Holy Spirit whispered and said, I just leveled the playing field. They don't have what you don't have anymore. And it was during that time, the Father spoke to me. The Holy Spirit was speaking one morning. And this is the command that I was given. And he said, John, I need you to do something. I need you to either begin to raise up Ekklesias, or I will take the church from you. Either raise Ekklesias, or I will take the church from you. So in the language we've been using this weekend, that should mean something to you now. Because I knew exactly what the Father was saying. I want you to leverage your position in this institutional model of church, to leverage it to actually accomplish what I was wanting to do from the beginning. And you can either get on board with my agenda of what I want to do to raise kingdom life leaders that build an ecclesia that deploy into culture, or there won't be a church. Because I need leaders that will lead Ekklesias, not people that will keep doing the same old thing. And I began to think about some conversations we had had with Lizette, because we went in March of 2019 and explored what they were doing. We implemented that in September of 2019. We went back to see them in October of 2019, and she began to talk about the transitions that they had gone through as God had taken them into this model. When they first started, they had a large building. They had extra office spaces for everyone. I think it was a 500-seat auditorium. Their songs were being sang in the islands all across the Caribbean. I just blanked on the word. They were the church. And as they began to deploy the kingdom message, people began to leave. And she was talking to us about how not only that, God began to strip everything away. And she said at one point, they sold their church building. They were meeting in a nightclub. They had rented this space. I thought it was cool, actually. But they were renting this space, and then they had changed so many things. And we sat by a pool as she talked to us, and she said she talked about the Father emptying her as she'd gone on this journey. And I'm sitting there honestly beginning to panic, because I'm realizing I don't know what journey I'm actually on. I know that I've obeyed a call, but I don't know exactly what it's going to cost as I go. And so I knew to continue leading in the institutional model, I had to raise Ekklesias, not focus on building a church. And I pivoted during this moment. We had been internally focused up until this point in time because we were trying to build our kingdom. We're trying to build a church, right? We're trying to build a church, trying to build a congregation, trying to get as many people saved as we could so that we could get people serving, so that we get more people to get saved, so we could get more people to be serving. A singular vision of a singular person, that's the model of the institution. And we have been working toward this and doing this, and honestly, we were invisible in the city. And Nick, my executive pastor, we began to have a conversation, and I asked him, I said, Nick, if we closed our doors, would the city notice or would they care? And the answer was no, they wouldn't. Nobody would even know that we disappeared. And he had the opportunity to join a leadership program that our city was putting together as we launched this school. Begin to make connections in the community. Now, his fivefold gifting is an evangelist. I've never seen an evangelist that is much evangelist as Nick Cavanis is an evangelist. And he began to make connections in the city, and all of a sudden, opportunities for us to partner with other organizations that weren't Christian organizations, but were godly in what they were attempting to do with other people. Opportunities began to open up. See, our model until this time had been, hey, we're going to do something for the community. We're going to give out food to poor people. Y'all come. We're going to bring all the church people to our church, and we're going to give away groceries to poor people. All the poor people come to our church, and we'll serve the community. And it was amazing. It was wonderful. But here's the thing. We never wanted to do anything we didn't get credit for because we were building our kingdom. We're building a church. We needed to make sure that when we did an outreach, we all wore our shirts so that people knew which church it was that was doing something for them. And so this was our model. I mean, and is there anything, I'm just going to leave that alone. This was our model. And I was like, I don't know that we're making a difference. And all of a sudden, Nick said, there's an organization that already does that. They need our help. So we partner with Baker Ripley, a huge nonprofit organization in our city. We do a food giveaway with them. We didn't get any credit for it. They were already doing it. We found out people were actually trying to help people develop life skills. And we're like, man, we've got an incredible volunteer force here of people that can partner with you and do what you're already doing. If we would just release them instead of just keeping them here, we send them to you, and we can actually make a difference in the city. So we made this pivot in September of 2019. And when Nick finished this leadership cohort, he was spending tons of time in the community. We had partnered with so many organizations and done so many things. By the time he finished that program that he was a part of, he was about to come back in. He's responsible for our life groups. He's responsible for our evangelism, our outreach. And he was spending a large portion of his time not working on our staff. But all of a sudden, doors were beginning to open for our church to actually make a difference in our community. And this program ended, and I said, Nick, you can't come back inside. This has been too beneficial for us. And so we fired him from his job. He was my executive pastor, and we hired his wife to be his boss, which was awesome. Yeah. She was the administrator at that point in time. She became the executive pastor. We repositioned him as the community pastor. He spends about 70% of his time in the community. He's hardly ever at the office. And he's on like 3 or 4 boards in our city. He serves as chairman or vice chairman of one of the boards. In 2 years, we went from invisible in our city. This year, we won the Nonprofit of the Year award in our city. We decided that since we have all this property that we only use Sunday morning, Sunday night, and occasionally for a class here and there, maybe we could put it to use to actually make a difference in the community. And the Chamber of Commerce, when we hit COVID, they knew that we did media. And they didn't know how to do media, and they needed to do hybrid events or events that were completely virtual. And we said, we know how to do that. We can help you. And for no compensation, no additional income to us, we partnered with Chamber of Commerce, helped them live stream on Facebook, social media, Zoom, their meetings that they were doing in the city. We opened our building, and we had, on multiple occasions, every top executive for the business leadership luncheon that they were hosting together, top executives in our building. We have a community outreach that is in our community currently. That they do a cooking class, and something happened to their commercial kitchen. I don't even know the details, but something happened to their commercial kitchen. Nick said, "Hey, can they come cook at the church? They'll feed us lunch when they do." And I'm like, "If you feed me, the answer is yes." If food is involved, it's a yes, right? So we have an organization that does their cooking class in our church building every Tuesday. We have a business that is coming that does a lot of work with their company. They do a lot of work developing their employees, and they are beginning to extend their leadership development capacity beyond their own employees, and they ask, could we use your building to do this? They're literally using the entire building, including our offices. We're having to move our desks against the wall. Some people are actually having to clean their offices, which is a good thing, So the building has become a center for our city because we changed directions. And there's been such impact and such curiosity that we now have 7 people that are in key influential positions in our city that have moved to our church to find out, what is this about? They've joined our leadership training. What are you guys doing that is different? 7 people have joined our church. It's just an incredible impact because we made a pivot. And so I realized I have to raise the Ekklesia, not focus on the church. So what's the difference? Well, there's probably a lot of differences, but one that I wanted to highlight today, and I forgot to bring the clicker. Could you put up my first slide? There's a couple of different models of the church. The first one is, it's that one. This is the typical model of the church institution. You have one leader at the top who's supposed to have a vision. And if he doesn't have a vision, then he's probably not going to be in leadership of the church very much or very long, because they're going to get somebody that has a vision. And everyone that is being developed, including those that are on the paid staff, are rising in leadership, and they're bottlenecked by the guy at the top. And they're jostling for fewer and fewer senior positions because there's only one spot at the top. And there's only one vision for this entire organization and for this house, and it's that man's. And if anything is being done in that organization, it is because he thought of it, he dreamed it up, and he decided that he wanted to delegate it to somebody. And so he looked for someone within his orbit that has said yes to his leadership. And he says, I'm going to give you a piece of my vision and you run this. And as long as you run this, or she says this, as long as you run this well, you get to stay in leadership, but it's never yours, it's always mine. And there's one leader at the top. And so in this model, the church is the kingdom. At least that's the mindset. Everything starts and ends here. We're going to expand the kingdom of God by growing the church. But we're not making an impact on the rest of the spheres of culture. We're just gathering everybody out of the 7 spheres and getting them over here into the church so we can talk a central language together instead of influencing all the ethnoi that are over here, all the different languages, all the different groups. So we get more people, we train more people to get more people to train more people. And this is terrific when it comes to getting people saved. I don't want to undermine or undervalue that fact. People are turning to Jesus, and it's doing a great job. This model does a great job of filling heaven with earthlings. But it does a terrible job when it comes to promoting the kingdom and filling earth with heaven. Because we've said, you all need to leave what you're doing. In fact, this is what we don't say, but what we imply. And this is what everybody believes. And if you don't believe me, just have a conversation and see if you find this language. If God loves you enough, if you were super special in the kingdom, you'd be part of the 2% that gets the lead over here in the church. But since God doesn't love you that much, you go out here and do this other stuff, just worldly stuff. It doesn't matter. And make money and give it to us so that we can do something important with it. And if you don't believe that people believe that, just have some conversations. And you will realize how few people in our congregations, in our churches, even with the effort that we're doing now, I still hear people talk about the dichotomy between the two things. And we still say it. In fact, I just had one of our core main leaders of our church stand on the stage 3 weeks ago and say, for those of us in full-time ministry, and it's like, we got to stop saying that. Because what he means is, for those of us, what we should say is this, for those of us whose calling and assignment is in the religious sphere or in the church in a congregational context. But see, that's too much to say. It's too hard to explain. So we just take the shortcut and say, for those of us who are called to full-time ministry, every single one of us in this room and every single person in your congregation is called to full-time ministry. But we cannot get the language right. And if we as leaders can't get the language right, they're never going to understand it because you're going to have to say it 1,000 times before it ever begins to sink in. So we're doing a horrible job at filling the earth with heaven. And so what we just chose to do is we open the lid and turn this thing on its side. Can you put up that other slide? This is not a great illustration, but it's just a concept. And I don't even like the central figure in the middle. I'd probably put that outside that whole flow. We went back, our initiation project, when people come into the church, we do a 4-week thing. We borrowed it from a church that does the other model really well. And when we adopted this kingdom mindset, I had to go redo the entire thing. Because at the beginning, what we would tell people is we'd tell them about us. I want to tell you about our church. I want to tell you about our vision for the city and why it's so important for you to get behind what God has called me to do. And God's got a great gift for your life. We want to find out all of your gifts and your passions. What are you gifted at? Man, that's amazing. What are you passionate about? That's incredible. So you really want to make a difference over here in this sphere with maybe single moms. Yes, that's my passion. That's incredible. You know what? What we have available for you in the church is we really need some people in the nursery. It never made sense to me. And when the kingdom message landed, I was like, I get it. Because we were never supposed to equip them to serve here. We were supposed to equip them to make their kingdom assignment impact outside the four walls of the church. And I'm like, now it makes sense. I need to know all that stuff because we're equipping you for the work of ministry that God has for you, and 98% of you are supposed to be somewhere else other than in the four walls of the church. And so we turned it on its side, and our goal from the beginning, we changed our language and said, the first thing that we talk about is that you're part of a royal family, and the second thing we talk about is if you're part of a royal family, that means you have a royal assignment. So the King of heaven has sent you here as one of his sons and daughters to grow up into the understanding of the purpose of your life and fulfill it while you're here alive on this planet. And from the outset, we begin to challenge people to take next steps and next steps and next steps, begin to engage in the kingdom purpose to launch into culture and to make an impact. But the issue is this. It empties my church. See, this is an interesting concept. So I was a part of a conversation Lizette was having with someone, and this person was a church leader, and they began to talk about their church planning strategy. And we should plant churches. It's great. It's church planning strategy, and they begin to show their plan. And Lizette asked this question to the church leader. That's awesome. That's incredible. You're planning churches, congregations, what we're talking about, right? Because church, we got to get the words right. I'm going to plan another congregational model. And Lizette said, but why wouldn't you plan a business? It doesn't make sense, does it? Wait, but that's not. No, we got to have a church. We can't even process the mind. Why wouldn't you plant a school? See, that's part of kingdom work too. Why wouldn't you train people for government? So when my best leaders begin to identify their assignment and mission out here, guess what? They begin to serve harder, more of their time and effort and energy go toward that. And when they come to the weekend, they're exhausted. I had somebody that calls me a spiritual father who wanted desperately to be on staff at a church because that's the pinnacle in his mind growing up. That was the pinnacle. If God loves me enough, I'm going to get an opportunity one of these days to leave my business, and God is going to allow me to be a pastor in a church. And I came, and we introduced this, and he's like, oh, wow, I'm already over here in the business. Oh, okay, I get it. And now, because his whole aim was here, he had spent in 20 years more of his time serving the church than almost any of our volunteers ever will. Because he was leveraging toward that aim. And guess what? When this message hit, he disengaged from that. And what the impact was for me is this, is I lost not the influence, I lost the volunteer hours that I had on a leader because he moved them over here. Do you see the impact? Do you see the danger of it? Because here's the thing. Yeah. It's almost like there's a competing agenda because now instead of having one vision, can you put that slide back up? Instead of having one vision for our church, every single person in our church has a vision. And so if you ask me what the vision for our church is, I really don't have one other than every single person would find the vision that God has for their life and accept their assignment. That's it. Like, I don't know, like, what is Pasadena supposed to be or our church supposed to be? I don't know. What specific ministry has God called me to? I don't know. I just know this. This is the one thing that my life is aimed toward is how can I raise up kingdom life leaders and get them on assignment? Because if the kingdom is ever going to show up in the earth, it's not going to show up on Sunday morning. It's going to show up Sunday through Saturday. Everywhere, in every space. He said he fills everything everywhere with himself. He is all in all. Now, here's the deal. When we do this in the church, it's scary, but this is normal in a family. Like at some point, I want my kids to move out. Like, please move out at some point. Find a husband. If there's anybody here, you guys know anybody? My daughter is single. We're working, right? That's wrong, yeah. I'm playing. We've ran several off, okay. So, yeah. This is normal and it's expected in a family, but in the church, we stifle it. Why? And here's what I'm just going to share for me, okay? This is probably nobody else in the room. I'm just going to share me. Because the institution validates us. More people in the seats means I'm a better pastor and a better leader. There's an issue of ego. It may not be an issue for you, it's an issue for me. As I say, God, you know what this is going to cost? You know what this is going to look like when I do a good job? It's going to look like I'm doing a terrible job. Because all the metrics that we've always counted, they don't work anymore. See, think of it like this. If I planted a church, what I would do is I would carve out a few people in my church, and I would say, y'all go over here. Y'all don't come to church with us anymore. Y'all go over here 20 miles away, 40 miles away, 100 miles, whatever. And y'all start a church. We'll see you later. We'll talk on Wednesday in the afternoon. We'll have a Zoom call. How you doing? No, I would do it this way. Y'all do whatever. 20 people just left our church, and all the tithe went with them. But what happens when we send people across the state to start a business or start an education? The same thing happens. But we don't see it that way. And so what I have faced personally during this season is the crushing of me. So when Doc was talking the second half last night, I told him at the end, you gutted me. Because this is the thing that the Father confronts with me every single morning when I meet with him. The issue is not the assignment. The issue is John getting in the way of it. And truthfully, even Amy and I aren't always on the same page about what this needs to look like. As we walk this thing out, we're struggling through, Lord, what are you saying? What does what you're saying look like? What are you asking of me? What is the pace? But we must wrestle. Will their attendance feed my ego, and will their tithe feed my belly? Those are the questions. Now, just quickly, if I can, in Numbers 22, this was this week, okay? This is just this week, my personal devotion with God. I texted Darren some stuff. He said, dude, you need to talk about that. This is just me this week. Numbers 22, Israel camps outside Moab. Israel was an ecclesia of nations. What God did is, now he had an ecclesia within the ecclesia, but they had a kahal within the nation of Israel. But God had called Israel out as an ecclesia to provoke the other nations to follow him. What do you guys got that is so special? Like, y'all have rain, we don't have rain. Tell me about that. Well, we serve another God. That was the whole thing of Israel. He's provoking the other nations, so they're an ecclesia to influence the other nations. That was their intention. Now, Moab was filled with dread because Israel shows up and parks out here. The church is filled with dread because of the ecclesia. The church is freaked out over people deconstructing their faith right now. I'll tell you this, I think people are getting it wrong, but I think that's the wind of the Holy Spirit, and people are catching it. They're just applying it wrong. It's what's happening right now. And so Balaam is hired to go and curse Israel, or curse the ecclesia. And so, you know this whole story. I don't need to go through it. So, at first, he asked God, can I go? Can I go? God says no. And then they send 22:15, they send more distinguished people. Oh wow, he sent important people. Can I go this time? And God says, yeah, go, but just say what I want you to say. Then God gets mad and wants to kill him and everything. It doesn't make any sense. What I believe is that God knew that Balaam wasn't going to say what he told him to say because Balaam was going for the money, not for God. And it presents me with a mirror. Am I willing to say what God is saying in this hour and do what he's doing regardless of the cost if it doesn't benefit me? Balaam says to his donkey after he lays down on him, you've made a fool of me. You've embarrassed me in front of all these people. By the way, I don't know. It just says that he had a conversation with a donkey. It doesn't say he reacted like, whoa, hang on. First time you've ever talked to me, this is weird. Just skip over stuff in the Bible. Like, I'm reading it, I'm like, this is not right. This is not what happened. They skipped over some really important details. It's like, donkey. Yeah. So just move on, right? Yeah. You made a fool of me. You are my vehicle to get where I was going, to get the revenue that was promised to me. And I wonder, this is what struck me. This is not I'm not preaching this as a theological thing, right? This is a parallel for my life, that what spoke to me. This is what I felt like the church, the vehicle I've been on, has sat down. It's not working anymore. A lot of us have faced this, that people didn't come back after COVID. There are people that are deconstructing their faith, and there are stars that lead the church that are being plucked out of the sky. Why? Because we're in transition from church to ecclesia. And what I'm afraid that we may be is a Balak that wants to hire a Balaam to curse the ecclesia that God is actually trying to birth. But we might need to start blessing it and realize that this is what God is doing. The donkey is not going to continue to take us where we were trying to go until we finally have an agreement and a confrontation with the angel and say, okay, I will only say what you tell me to say. Is our ass sitting down because we won't release the ecclesia? Are we losing congregations because we're not focused on raising and releasing the ecclesia? Are we beating the donkey trying to get out of it what it sees that it can't get past? Are we beating the dead horse, literally? So remember, God said to me, raise the ecclesia or I'll take the church from you. If we are to lead, I believe that if we're to lead in the church, meaning inside the institution, in this hour, I firmly believe it had better be for one purpose, and that is to extract the ecclesia. Because I think that's the agenda for this hour, for this age, for us. Last verse, I'll close with this. I was just thinking about this. When Rachel was about to die, Genesis 35:18, Rachel was about to die, and with her last breath, she named the baby Ben-Oni, which means son of my sorrow. But the baby's father, however, called him Benjamin, which means son of my right hand. And I wonder if Rachel is going to pass away in this season, but Benjamin, the ecclesia, is going to come out of her, and we're going to see the right hand of God do a work in the earth. That's what I wonder. Darren, it's yours.